Hey guys, it's Professor Matt here with an overview of Chapter 2 in your textbook. So, Chapter 2 has to do with public relations models throughout the ages. Okay, so here we're going to talk about the history. Like, how did this profession start? Where did PR begin and where is it today? Okay, so I'm going to give you a brief overview of the history, highlight a couple of people you need to know, and then we'll talk about some of the models, right? Of the models that say, this is how PR works. Okay, first of all, the number one model, actually number one, the very first model of PR was called the press agentry publicity model. Now think about in the 1880s, the late 1880s, the poster child for the publicity press agentry model is P.T. Barnum. You know, the guy that started the Barnum and Bailey Circus. So P.T. Barnum, his whole thing was getting people into the show, right? Getting them into the tent so they could see the show. It didn't matter whether what he was saying was truthful or accurate. In fact, what he most talked about most was hype, hyperbole, exaggeration. And that was the key to that. So press agents were around during the 1880s. People like Annie Oakley and Wild Bill Hickok were two famous, American West pioneers. But the press agents were the ones that created the mythology around them. It was hype, it was exaggeration, it wasn't true, but that was their job. So when you think about the press agentry model, think around the late 1880s, think P.T. Barnum, and think exaggeration. The second model that press agentry sort of evolved into was the public information model. And the guy you want to think about for that is Ivy Lee. Ivy Lee in 1901 started the very first press bureau or PR agency. Now the difference with the public information model compared to the press agentry model is that the public information model is concerned about truth and accuracy. Ivy Lee was all about helping businesses and governments put out accurate, truthful information so people could use that information to make informed decisions. Okay, so think public information model, Ivy Lee. Now, the public information model is still practiced by some people who do PR. Think, for example, people who do public information for a government, local, state, federal, whatever. They might be called the Public Information Officer, the PIO. Their job is to get real, truthful, accurate information out to the publics. Now, the next model is the two-way asymmetrical model. The guy you need to know for the two-way asymmetrical model is Edward L. Bernays, perhaps the most important person in the history of PR. Edward Bernays was called the father of modern public relations. So what makes a two-way asymmetric model modern? Well, Edward Bernays was the first to use social science in order to craft messages that would resonate psychologically with the people he was trying to reach. Now, the model is called asymmetric, which means not balanced, because the information that he would get from the publics was simply to know them better so he could persuade them better. That's where the asymmetry is. It wasn't the idea that you're going to listen to them so you're going to adjust. That's the next model. But it was asymmetric in the sense that you want to learn about your publics so you can persuade them more effectively. And Edward Bernays was a master of that. 1923, he wrote the first textbook in PR called Crystallizing Public Opinion and started to develop some of the first courses that we had in public relations. So an important man to know about. You're going to look in, there's a case study there about the torches of freedom. It doesn't look too good on I can't say that, Edward Bernays, but you got to remember it was a different time back then. So read the Torches of Freedom and learn a bit more about Edward Bernays. Okay, the next model, the last model we're going to talk about is the two-way symmetrical model of communication. So symmetric means balanced. So this time, it's another two-way communication model. Press agentry and public information, that was one way. Okay, the two-way asymmetric was unbalanced. The two-way symmetrical is balanced communication, and that's what we practice today. So the difference is that when we listen to our publics, we will demonstrate that we've listened to them and heard them by making adjustments. Okay, so the two-way communication is balanced, it's symmetrical. Okay, and that's where we are today. So when I talk about the history of public relations, I kind of started in the 1880s, but if you go back way back in history, there's always been attempts to persuade people to do something, to not do something, to keep on doing something. So look at the sort of the broader social history of public relations in the textbook. Now the book also talks about in this chapter the major motivations for public relations. And they go through things like recruitment, which is one of the reasons why PR is used, to recruit people to your side. You want them to believe what you believe. You want to get them on your side so they're voting the way you want them to vote, or volunteering, or buying your products, or whatever it might be. Another one that's kind of interesting is legitimacy. Legitimacy is another motivation for PR. And there's a big long German word there that I'm going to let you figure out how to say. But essentially what it is the notice of status conferral. Okay? Businesses operate with the permission of the public. What does that mean? It means that without the public supporting them, whether by financially buying products, using services, or adopting an idea, or voting for a candidate, these organizations would not be in existence. So status conferral, legitimacy, is something that is used for motivation for PR. Then you get agitation. Of course, you see a lot of that today in terms of getting people agitating to make sure people are on your side. Advocacy, which is huge for us. We are advocates, principled advocates for those that we represent. Profit, obviously. And in fact, more and more PR people need to demonstrate how public relations efforts contributes to the bottom line. I'm going to talk a lot about ROI in this course, return on investment. If you have a client that gives you $100,000, what can you give back to them in return, right? What's the return on investment? Okay, and then again, in the back of this chapter, there's another section on ethics, talking about some of the differences between public relations and journalism. Okay, we're not supposed to be objective in PR. We're supposed to be advocates. Journalists, on the other hand, should be objective, but we don't see that as much today. Anyway, that's a brief overview of Chapter 2. Read the chapter, take the quiz, make sure you post and respond in the discussion section, and I'll see you next time.